All right, so today I wanted to make another quick video on Bitcoin and how it may be 6 months, a year, who knows, before we get a new all-time high, and for all we know, into the hundreds of thousands. And my point here is that this may be the last chance for your average guy, your average gal, to actually accumulate one Bitcoin. And I tweeted this out yesterday. One Bitcoin will be enough to retire on within the next 25 years or earlier. Honestly, I think I'm being conservative there, if anything, because I think you're going to get a, I don't know, double, triple every halving, right? So if we go to 200 to 300 this halving, right? And then maybe 600, 700 the next halving. Well, okay, we're 12 years away from a million, or maybe even right 8 years away, but 12 years away from a million a coin, right? Now again, $1 million in 12 years isn't, I mean, it's right now it's not even what it used to be, but then it definitely won't be what it used to be, right? So, and in all reality, especially if you want to retire earlier, in 2030, 2040, you're probably going to need 2-3 million to retire on, unless you live in a very, very affordable area. But again, if you're going to retire early, you probably want to be, leaning on the more comfortable side, right? But again, obviously everything here, my opinion, do your own due diligence. I'm no expert necessarily. I'm just saying my opinion here. I have done a lot of research, but again, just saying my opinion. And the reason that I say this too is that once Bitcoin goes into the hundreds of thousands, that's pretty hard for your average person to accumulate one. Not that if it stayed there, obviously if it stayed there for 20, 30 years, then yeah, you could, but that's not going to happen, right? And even if it does happen, then you probably won't want to do it, right? So that's the thing. Once it goes into the hundreds of thousands, people don't have, like your average person doesn't have that kind of money just lying around. And even if they do, it probably isn't a good idea to throw it all in at once, unless it's in the midst of a bear market. But again, you don't know exactly when it's going to bottom, and you don't know exactly when it's going to top, right? And especially once we start to get, I think it's inevitable we get an ETF. That's why we're seeing such a draw up recently. And even if you don't get the ETF, if it doesn't happen this time, it's inevitable, right? There's, double, triple leveraged Tesla ETFs, and yet you can't get a spot Bitcoin ETF. Like there's 3x NASDAQ, 3x semiconductor, like the most, maybe not literally the most risky, but, way, way, way above average risk. So this idea that a regular ass spot Bitcoin ETF is too risky is laughable, right? So it's inevitable we get an ETF. It's only a matter of time, whether it's this time or in a year or two. It's inevitable, right? It's got to happen at some point. And even if it doesn't happen, it's not like that's the end of the world, because without an ETF, there's still nothing stopping institutional investors from just holding it themselves, right? But I'm excited for an ETF, because when we get an ETF, not only is that going to cause a lot of inflows, it's also going to provide a better opportunity to trade options on Bitcoin, which is something that I don't trade, but I do think is very useful for people. I think short-term trading in anything is unless you're willing to spend hours a day doing research, I think it's stupid. I don't recommend trading to anyone. And again, this is the other thing too. It's like, how many people have made hundreds of millions or billions of dollars day trading? I'm guessing somebody has, but I can't think of a single person. But yet you can think of a laundry list of people who've made it the traditional form of investing, real estate, even crypto, right? So it doesn't make sense to me to trade. But again, I'm just saying there. But again, this is going to be very, very important for people. And the main reason that I make this as well is my biggest fear with Bitcoin is not the garbage FUD you hear from the average person. My biggest fear with Bitcoin is the likely scenario plays out and it continues to easily outperform the market, return 20-30% a year or whatever it's returned. And once it goes into the millions, then you get your average idiot who's trying to deal with their stupidity of not buying when they had the chance, and they'll say, "Oh my God, we got to tax the ever living hell out of it, and you just got lucky," and all the usual garbage that you'll hear. That's my biggest fear, right? Is that the smart people, i.e. the ones that have been buying for years, will get persecuted because they made the obviously smart decision, and the people who can't come to grips with the fact and just admit they're wrong are going to go after the smart people. That's my biggest fear, right? But again, like I say, to summarize, my main point here is we may be less than a year. I mean, I could see after the ETF is announced, I mean, that could add 10, 20,000 a coin right there, literally. I think we'll see at least a $5,000 jump when that's announced, right? So we could be 6 months, a year away from the average person never, ever being able to accumulate a full Bitcoin, right? So my recommendation, again, just my personal opinion, is always to just dollar cost average. If you're thinking that it's going to go to $1 million, $2 million, like I think it eventually will, again, just my opinion, just dollar cost average. Right, a lot of people, they try and time the market again. And let's just say you can time the market. I mean, are you going to care? Like, if it goes to $1 million, like you probably think if you're buying, are you going to care if you return 10,000% or 9,500%? Like, no, you're not going to care. It's the difference of $1 million or 950 or 900,000. Like, yeah, it would be nice, but it's not something that's going to keep you up at night. You're probably more likely to be kept up at night if you buy right at the top, or if you buy and you get a big drawdown, than if you just dollar cost average. Right? So again, that is just my opinion. Like I say, everything my opinion. Do your own due diligence. But I wanted to put this out because I think that this is very much realistic. Now again, the other question too is that how low will we come during the next bear market? And typically you come down, at least the last two. I mean, we came down to almost just below the high from the last one the time before. Like, I mean, I think it was like 16, 17,000 US, and I think the high was about 20,000 the last time around. Right? So that would imply that the next low would be whatever, 60, 70,000 US. So maybe you get lucky, but my worry there is that if an ETF is announced, I think that probably lowers the volatility on both sides, right? Because that means that there's going to be that steady drip of these institutional investors investing into that ETF, and not to mention too, once an ETF is announced, that it's going to cause people to buy more personally and stuff. So I think the volatility will go down over time, right? But especially on the downside. We're not going to see these massive draw-ups as well, but I think the volatility on the downside will go down even more than the volatility on the upside, right? Because those halving cycles, and this is something that people don't seem to understand about Bitcoin. The demand for Bitcoin, all it needs to do is stay exactly where it is right now, and the price is going to double, actually more than double, because eventually it's going to get to the point to where the supply is actually going down, not because lost coins, and I mean, eventually there's not going to be any new coins, but I mean, that's over 100 years away, so it's not going to be in any of our lifetimes, but eventually it's going to get to the point where the supply is literally going down. And this is something people don't seem to realize, is that the demand does not need to continue to go up. It literally just needs to be maintained. And that's the best thing about it. So anyway, that's what I wanted to bring up today. If you liked the video, hit that like and subscribe, and stay tuned for more.